The Private Property Land Stewardship Program is an environmental goods and services program seeking to financially reward and incentivise farmers to produce food and fibre and incentivise biodiversity and improve land management practices. The proposal is designed to diversify farm income streams to provide a buffer against adverse conditions such as drought in the future. As part of the program, we've been embarking on a range of those the opportunities and methodologies that are out there. We did a pilot trial at Maggie McDonald's farm Glencoe, and we've been working with some partners creating a digital twin, a map of the farm using an app called FarmLab, and we've been worked with another company called Carbonate to do the soil carbon testing. What we found out was that the low combination of low rainfall environment that we live in here doesn't provide a great deal of opportunity for soil carbon, especially at Maggie's farm that had pretty good ground cover and soil organic carbon levels existing already of about 1.3% on average, and we think that the average in this area would be about 1.5% carbon, so not a great scope to improve that. Obviously that's a long-term goal, taking into account high rainfall years where you build carbon and drought years when you lose carbon. So we've got a report we'll be sharing with the public on that and the dollar figures that we could be expected to get out of soil carbon. We've also been looking at biodiversity payment opportunities. So I'll just talk to Maggie a bit about the learnings we've done so far on that topic.
Yeah, no worries. So as Rog said, we've been looking into all of the different options that are out there and available for landowners in our region to earn alternative incomes, to build in resilience for those drought years that we all know we experience around here. So in terms of the biodiversity and carbon space, really, it's an ever-evolving industry at the moment, with even since we started this project and did our first lot of carbon assessments in September, even since then the methodologies have already changed. So it's an ever-changing sphere that we're trying to keep up with. So in terms of biodiversity at the moment, we have found out that there is 3 different opportunities in terms of bringing in an income to do with your biodiversity. So the first one is through the New South Wales government, and it is called the Biodiversity Credit Offset Scheme. Now through that scheme, you have your land assessed for the remnant veg or possible re-veg works that you've done on your property, and then developers in other areas who are looking to offset their biodiversity from new developments can then come and buy those credits off you. So it's a pretty competitive market, that one, so it's good if you can get some credits into that one. The other one we've been looking into with Regen Farmers Mutual is the possibility of a private biodiversity credit trading platform. So I might let Rog speak a bit about the Regen Farmers.
Yes, the Regen Farmers Mutual, I suppose it's got a goal of returning as much money as it can back to farmers, and also to land care organisation to provide that independent advice back to landholders on where opportunities lie. What we propose to do is go to farmers or an aggregation of farms and do a rapid assessment of the biodiversity opportunities for a farm. It might be a biolink, a wildlife corridor or whatnot, and then go to the market to see what the market's prepared to pay for that service to be looked after for that land stewardship, and opportunities to enhance remnant vegetation, provide filling gaps between isolated remnant pockets or whatever by creating a corridor. So they're examples of what can be done through the Regen Farmers Mutual is to go through them as a broker to look for those markets, and for land care to go and provide information to communities and to landholders of what opportunities are available. The federal government has made it quite clear that in the future there's probably not going to be as much money around for supporting farms through drought support. They want to incentivise good practices and encourage people to plan now for the future and then looking to pay for people to reward them for good land stewardship and biodiversity outcomes that the broader Australian public are looking for. And so we want to get on the front foot and look for those opportunities for our community, so there is an income from preserving biodiversity in the future, especially in those drought years. So yeah, we've learned a fair few things along the way too, Maggie, with methodologies.
Yes.
In New South Wales in particular, this program we're working on has been funded through local government New South Wales. It is so we sort of it's New South Wales sort of centric that we've been looking at opportunities through accreditation, through accounting for nature, through an assessment method there, and another project called Habitat Hectares. There's some learnings along there. Would you like to talk about that, Maggie?
What we found through trialling the different methodologies was that some of the ones that are used elsewhere in Australia are on a national or a state basis. So the Accounting for Nature, which is a nationally accredited one, and then also Habitat Hectares, which is a Victorian accredited methodology. What actually happens there is they rely on a set of pre-1750 data benchmarks, which is available in most other states in Australia, but that benchmark data actually doesn't exist in New South Wales, which through weeks and weeks and weeks of researching and trying to get our hands on this data, we've finally reached an endpoint where it's actually just not available for the majority of New South Wales. So that's been a very interesting learning, that one. So it has meant that although we can use the methodologies in the field to go out and collect the data according to methodologies such as Accounting for Nature, we can't then take it back and use that existing framework to do the data analysis, because it really relies on this pre-1750 data that just doesn't exist for our area. So we've had to look a bit further and we've come up with two methodologies that look like they're going to be the best for our region. And they are the rapid assessment method, which is used by New South Wales Government, and the biodiversity assessment method. So they're both known as the RAM method and the BAM method. The BAM method is a really rigorous, all-intensive method which requires doing quite a few transects out in the field, but it's really rigorous and it has international standings. So that's if you're looking for your highest confidence level data collection on your property, if you're wanting to take it to market, that is the one you would go for. However, the rapid assessment method is a really great one to just get a general overview of your property and look where your standings are at, and to look at what your opportunities potentially are, and if you want to take it further and do some more analysis.
Thanks, Maggie. That's a great summary of our learnings today. And you know, the reason we're doing this is so other people can learn from what we've done. We're doing a pilot on Maggie's farm about looking at the potential through the rapid assessment method, what the potential income could be for the biodiversity method. We've got something written down for soil carbon, now biodiversity, and as an indicator, and then if we get some more funding down the track, we will look at doing the BAM method, which is more intense, labour intense, and a bit more robust scientific data. In the future, our land care group wants to work with our local community and farmers to do that RAM method, and get some resources to do the BAM later on, and the benchmarking, so it can show change over time.
We think that's a really important way to empower the landowners, isn't it? By doing that just initial assessment, so they know what they're working with and they know what their future opportunities are.
And a win-win outcome, building drought resilience, an income stream for drought periods and other times. So a baseline funding and improve biodiversity and land management outcomes. Looking at soil carbon, offsetting, insetting, these terms, What are they all about?
Yeah, so from our research thus far, we have found that the carbon world is so complex, and the more I learn about it, the more complex it is. There are so many different avenues and different methodologies that are ever evolving at the moment as the industry grows in popularity and demand. So we've probably all heard the media is saturated at the moment with everybody wanting to be carbon neutral. Every big organisation, business that you can think of, they're all spruiking that they're on the pathway to carbon neutrality. But what does that really mean? So for an organisation that doesn't own land, that means that they need to look to the carbon market to buy carbon credits off someone else to then inset that carbon neutrality into their own business. So what that means for landowners is you've got a few different options. So what you can do is you follow a methodology and you assess the carbon that is on your property. As we discussed earlier in our region, due to our low rainfall environment, we're prone to not having great soil carbon measurements. But there are ways that you can increase the carbon sequestration, such as through new tree plantings and whatnot. And as your carbon increases, you can actually get credits for that increase in carbon levels in your property. And so then what you can do once you have the credits, you actually have two options. So if you're a business that is selling your own produce, you can then inset those carbon credits into your product so that your business and your product at the end of the day is carbon neutral. So that's called carbon insetting, is when you're using your own carbon credits on your own property for your own end product. But the other option as landowners that you have is to actually take your carbon credits to the carbon market and trade those credits off to other businesses who are looking to offset their carbon emissions. So what we found so far though is that there's a few different ways you can go about that. So there's an international standard where you can have your carbon scores analysed, set to the international regulations, and then you can take it to private or international markets all over the world and trade with those credits, which can prove to be have a pretty positive financial impact. Now, the other option is you can follow the Australian Clean Energy Regulator method, and what you get if you follow that method is an Australian carbon credit unit called an ACCU. Now, if you've gone down that method and you've generated ACCUs, then you've got two options as well. So you can take it to the Australian carbon credit market and trade it on there, or what you can do is you can also enter into an agreement with the Australian government, and that is where you will be paid a certain amount per hectare of land that you are using for your carbon credits, and that's on a yearly basis, and that's a long-term carbon abatement contract. So those are your two options when it comes to your Australian carbon credit units. So yeah, as we said, it's ever evolving and ever changing, but that is a quick overview of what the carbon industry is looking like at the moment and how that can impact on us as landowners.
What are the other learnings out of our Building Our Communities in Advance project? One of the deliverables was meeting with the leadership team with council on a quarterly basis in relation to the project and the status of the activities that we've embarked on through this project. Some valuable feedback we got from emergency services personnel, in particular, was related to land management that goes under some covenants or some stewardship programs in the future with overlays on vegetation or land that's gone into agreements. That overlay needs to be captured and known by emergency services in the future. It could be quite valuable, and so emergency services need to know, that there's a need to maybe resource appliances or whatever, or personnel to those areas in a different manner than they probably may have otherwise would have in the future, because they have a different value.
Yeah,
and so that's a learning for emergency services. Even though we're on a steering committee of the Regen Farmers Mutual and others, they were very interested in knowing that in the future, I'm sure many councils will also take that into
Yeah,
account.
that's a really important one, that one, because some of the biodiversity credits that you can sell and trade in and the schemes you enter into are actually lifelong. So no matter how many hands that property goes through and ownership changes, those credits are still linked to that title. So yeah, the different management options are really crucial to upholding their value.
Also, Maggie, we talked a bit before about carbon and biodiversity. One of the other learnings?
Yeah, so there was one other layer that I forgot to mention earlier. So we've spoken about the possibilities when it comes to carbon credits and the biodiversity credits. Now, at the moment, there's no way to link the two and there's no equivalence factor. That could change in the future, but at the moment, they're completely separate entities. And the way they work in Australia and in particular New South Wales is that if you have entered into an agreement where you are generating carbon credits from, that land cannot be used for biodiversity credits as well. And likewise, if you're using your land for biodiversity credits, you can't also be generating carbon credits off of the same block of land. However, when it comes to biodiversity credits, there's one other thing you can layer on top, which is a bit of icing on top of the cake, if you want to look at it like that. If you've got a bit of land set aside and you're generating your biodiversity credits from it, the thing you can add on top is actually credits for endangered flora and fauna species. So that's called the Endangered Flora and Fauna Offset Scheme, which is a New South Wales government scheme. And so that is if you've got your areas set aside generating biodiversity credits, but you also have sightings of our rare flora and fauna species, you can then generate a separate credit on top of your biodiversity credit. So they stack upon each other, and each endangered species is actually its own credit as well. So that can be a really valuable one to look into, and it incentivises looking after our local natural flora and fauna.
Thanks, Maggie. And we'll tie that into the biodiversity management plan for the region and those focal species that we have.
Absolutely.